Why am I making this video? So I wanted to share with you why I made the Polymath PolyCast, which is a show where I interview polymathic, multidisciplinary, generalist people, and it's been going on now for 5 years. It's really interesting to think about the journey of going on through it. Now, I have had a lot of ups and downs. I've had a lot of issues with different tools. I've had a lot of greatness with different tools. And I wanted to just kind of share my story with you about doing interviews and even doing the solo episodes too, because that's part of the history. And so I'm just going to give you the whole trajectory there. But first and foremost, I'm going through the first season right now. Well, technically it's the second season, but the first season of interviews. And there was a few interviews where by the time Opus Clip came out, the clips were kind of old, right? Like I'm saying, like I made these clips when Opus Clip first started. And so I was like, okay, I need to revamp these interviews into Opus Clip again, which is like funny because I've dumped it before. But my point is, like, I'm going through some old interviews, and by dumping them into Opus and just finding these clips again and finding new clips because, the tool has changed so much over the years. But I just wish it came out sooner. Let me start from the beginning. Back in about late 2017, early 2018, I knew I wanted to do an audio kind of show. I knew I wanted to also do YouTube too, but my trajectory was kind of like, okay, I'm used to making blog posts and I'm comfortable with that. I am not comfortable being on camera. Right now, I have no qualms with this at all. I've made a couple different auditory mistakes, if you will, and I didn't fix my hair, but for the most part, this is just raw on me. I'm not going to care too much about the editing or anything like that. I just want to tell you the story. In fact, that's why I'm making this right now, because I just felt such the urge to create this video. So my point is, like, now I can make videos from scratch, no problem at all, and hopefully be pretty interesting for you. But back then, I was like, let me get used to hearing my own voice on recording first, and let me get used to making more auditory content, and that'll help me kind of transition into doing video content. And I'm not sure if many people think of it that way or not, and maybe some do, but that's how I got started. And so I started doing the ULC podcast. I started doing the first couple episodes of the PolyCast, and I even started doing the Fireside Codex, which was like my Fireside PolyCast, which was my own personal, basically, public journal, if you will. So the whole first season of the Polymath PolyCast is all solo episodes. Those are all three of those shows pushed together, and then I wrapped up with a few more shows, and then I started the second season. And the whole idea was I was going to have, for every couple solo episodes, I'm going to have an interview. And that was kind of the trajectory, and I might still bring that back, although in recent videos I have said that I don't intend going forward to do any solo episodes on the Polymath PolyCast. And I really don't do them at all on the Creator Spotlight other show I do. And so really from now on, I really just want to focus on the interviews. And that way, even though they take longer to process and longer to interview, like find people, edit, upload, and all that jazz, I've gotten a lot better at it. And I'm going through the second season, which again, first season that I did the interviews. And I was just watching a video with Eric Wallace, who I've had on the show now a couple times. Technically 3 if you count the unreleased episode. And he's such an amazing guest. And he's pretty much in the same line with Leonardo da Vinci and how we think and how polymaths think. And over the years, I've interviewed people who I thought were polymathic and perhaps weren't, right? Like Chris Ippolito or something like that. And so I don't necessarily focus on that content anymore. I focus on the people who really embody that idea more so, like Eric Wallace, Dr. Merritt Moore, and Angela Catalesa Myers. And so it's interesting to think about. Over the years, I've learned how to be a better interviewer, how to listen better, how to focus better on preparing the interviews too. And I think I've gotten a little complacent in the last year or so, and that's not good. And I want to get better about that, which is one reason why I've paused the Polymath PolyCast show. And recently I did a panel with all the polymath researchers, or not all of them, but all the major 3 ones. And that was really interesting. And I'm actually starting a new YouTube channel that are all clips of the Polymath PolyCast. So I'm reposting all the clips, which is why I threw in a few old episodes into Opus again to make new clips. And I'll share that link down below. Please go check it out. I'm actually trying to do mid-form clips as well, which means real YouTube videos with, medium length actual video, so 8, 10, 15 minutes. And so I'm really excited to share those. I'm going to be going through pretty much 99% of all the interviews and dropping them in there. And it's interesting to think about even the lessons we learned during COVID, right? That's when I started doing interviews. So like for 2019, 2018, those were all solo episodes. For the first few months of 2020, even, that was solo episodes. But in about April or May of 2020, that's when I started doing interviews. And it's actually kind of funny because 3 years later, it was around April, May, and June is when I started. I think it was like end of May, beginning of June is when I started doing clips from Opus. And then now this year too, I actually, I think around that time finished the seventh season of the Polymath PolyCast. And really, the whole point is like from 2020 to 2025, I have made, a couple hundred interviews between my two different shows, which is not that much. For 5 years, that's not that much. But I put so much effort into it. And like I said, I had a lot of highs and a lot of lows. One low was when I had the issue with Repurposed.io. And so like 20 interviews went over to YouTube at very low quality, and that wasn't good. I had also lows where I thought it looked good visually. I wanted to make sure I got rid of the black backgrounds that Zoom created. And so I put my own backgrounds on there, and I put the title at the top. I put the names down below. And I think I need to bring back the names, but I still kind of find that to be a little tedious when I'm editing. I just want to get it done. And so I kind of just cut some of those steps out just to make sure I get these interviews out and done. But I mean, nowadays, when I do a video, I just split it down the middle and have both people take up the full canvas. But that makes it really harder to use Opus, actually, because Opus doesn't know where to find me. If I'm like just using this much of my viewport, Opus tries to like zoom in to just my face, and that's not good. And I've told them about this, and I told them that it's really kind of the way that I'm structuring the video. So what I've done now is actually I export it twice. I export it vertically and horizontally, and on the vertical one, I just toss that into Opus, because then my full viewport of this whole background gets viewed. And so those are lessons that I learned. And like Repurposed.io was the issue was I was posting too much in a short time span. Granted, it was an issue with their servers, not so much me. They should have been able to handle someone doing something daily. But again, new tool at the time, newish kind of thing. It was like 2021 when it happened. And so like it was pretty early on. No hard feelings in that regard. And then there's other things like with Opus Clip where I've had really great experiences and really not so great experiences. But for the most part, it's been helpful. I have thousands of clips now to post. And I'm actually going to go through in Opus again and find those mid-form clips. And I wanted to start this new channel, and I'm also doing the same thing for the PolyTools Creator Spotlight show as well, where I made an Instagram and YouTube. I don't think I'm going to do TikTok, where I'm just going to reshare all the clips, and it's just for this show. And that way, if you wanted to watch some of the mid-form clips and find certain episodes that you might not have been aware of before, you can. There was also one thing I really wanted to do where every interview on the Polymath PolyCast, I asked a guest, what is a polymath to you? And so I wanted to actually get those clips, post those clips out, but then also compile those clips into videos. And I think that would be really interesting to do as well. And so I think that that's something I need to go ahead and do here soon, especially since there's better tools now to make it happen. There's actually like Video Bolt where I can merge all the videos into one, all the clips into one massive compilation of answers. So it's interesting to think about now that the tools allow me to do the things that I wanted to do and take a more polymathic approach to content creation. Now, I finished the 7th season this year, and I'm thinking that I might stop, actually, the Polymath PolyCast around season 10. I think that's where I'm just going to be like, okay, for now, I've interviewed enough people. I might bring it back down the line, but that phase of my life is now completed for now. And so that's 3 more seasons left. And I think that that's going to be just enough people to actually interview, especially if I'm focusing on just the interviews, no longer doing solo or rarely ever doing solo. That's 42 times 3, 126 more people that I can interview. And so it's going to be really interesting to think about who am I going to find for the show. And the next season, I'm already having people lined up from the Polymath Festival that's going on right now. But it was crazy to me that in 2020, of all years, is the year that I started doing interviews, right? Everyone was stuck at home, and I saw the opportunity. And the reason why I wanted to make this video, and this is where you can kind of leave off if you're not interested, but this is my personal anecdotes. I just remember being in my last apartment, and it was in the middle of 2020. You couldn't go anywhere. And so I was like walking around the park that was across the street. There's a nice creek surrounded by trees. And if you walked far enough, you can go onto the trail. But it was a nice park, and I would find myself listening to other podcasts or going on like podcast walks because I needed to get out of the house. I was climbing the walls, and I was having a hard time working out because there was no gym that was open. But I remember like almost every day, essentially, multiple times a week, I was going on podcasts and I was having podcast interviews. And yet, despite being like a very much more extroverted person, I was able to get that energy, back because I was doing all these interviews, and it was so much fun. And I remember, like, even from the beginning, like, I watched my first interview and some of my first beginning interviews when I threw them into Opus, and I'm like, man, I'm not doing half bad. but I'm also not that good. And it's just interesting to me that those skills as a content creator, they form over the course of time. And it was like, I haven't talked to some of the guests since that interview. As much as I've tried reaching out to them, sometimes they're just too busy. They're CEOs or something like that. And while I've had a lot of returning guests, I've had a lot of other guests that have not returned. And some of them that I probably won't ask because of relationships that have happened outside of the place. And so it's interesting to think about okay, I made this show because I wanted to connect with other polymath people. I wanted to build out my network, and I also wanted to have the audio arm of the content ecosystem. And it's all those goals that I had, I accomplished through that. While I thought they were kind of bigger in my head at the beginning, now it's kind of smaller compared to everything else that I'm doing. But it's just okay, that's it for today. I don't need to share anything else. But I'm just thinking in 2021 and 2020, even 2022, I was just going on all cylinders. And I was getting kind of burned out from it too. But it was such a great opportunity, and I'm so glad I did it.